morning everyone, and welcome to Campaign's second event of 2023, Campaign Breakfast Briefing, Sharpening Your Marketing Strategies. I'm Nadeem Qureshi, the publisher of Campaign Middle East. It's good to see all the familiar faces again. Thank you everyone for attending and supporting us. Before we get on with the event today, and I hand over the mic to Justin, I wanted to brief everyone on the latest developments at Campaign Middle East. We're in the process of sending to press our March edition magazine, which is on social media platforms, with our first guide on influencer marketing agencies in the region. And this issue also has the coverage of the Dubai Links winners. What an amazing night it was the day before, where we saw some amazing work being awarded to the top agencies in the region. So please stay tuned for this special edition end of this month. We have also opened nominations for the agency's Faces to Watch. As you are aware, in this annual issue in April, Campaign Middle East recognizes the best upcoming young talent aged 30 and under in media, creative, comms and digital agencies in the region. The deadline to submit all nominations is 7th April, and this year too, this incredible young talent stand to win 4 30% scholarships and 1 100% scholarship, courtesy of a long-time partner, Heriot-Watt University. We also released last week our first podcast for this year with Meta on ad opportunities during the Ramadan period, and we have another podcast being edited from Snapchat due to release end of this month. Our next event would be Campaign Saudi Briefing in Riyadh on 31st May. And Justin is just in the process of programming this event. Please reach out to him with suggestions on key topics that you would like to see covered in this event, and we hope to see you all in Saudi as well. We will have all these details and a lot more latest developments on our website, social media platforms, and weekly newsletters, so please don't forget to subscribe and follow us in order to get our latest news and updates on all our future events and editions. One last point, I would like to ask everyone to send us your feedback on the content that you hear today. You can see the agenda papers in front of you with a survey QR code. Please scan it and give us your valuable feedback on every session so that we can work with all our partners for a much stronger and relevant content. Right, that's about it from me. I will hand over the mic now to Campaign Middle East editor Justin Harper, who will take today's events forward. Thank you everyone again for attending, and feel free to reach out to me for any partnership queries with Campaign Middle East. Hope you enjoyed today's event and have a nice day ahead. Over to you, Justin.
Thanks Nadeem for the great pun on my name. I should thank you for remembering my name, because you've been calling me Austin for the last 6 weeks. So it's great now that you finally got my name right. So thanks for that. So it's good morning, and it's great to see so many of you here. I think, as Nadeem mentioned, this is our second biggest big event of the week, after the Dubai Links Festival on Tuesday and Wednesday, the festival and the awards. And that was a huge success for us, and it showcased some of the brilliant work coming out of the region. It was a great chance to listen to some very smart and passionate marketeers and some agencies give their insights. A lot of ideas were bounced around, which I was sitting in on some of the round tables, from charging for pitches, which sparked a lot of debate. There seems to be a momentum for charging for pitches, to how AI can be a valuable tool for the creative industry and not a threat. Plus, I also walked away with a couple of books, courtesy of publicists, and a hoodie from TikTok, so it was quite a productive day for me anyway. So moving on to today, we're excited to kick off our monthly breakfast briefing, which today will take a look at marketing strategies for the year ahead and how we can sharpen them. We'll be talking about hyper-personalized consumer engagement, brand safety and suitability, along with CTV advertising, among a number of trending marketing topics. So enough of me, let me introduce our first guest, who comes from Clever Tap, which is nothing to do with plumbing and nothing to do with water. It's actually a very different brand. So they will be talking about the valuable insights on how brands can harness hyper-personalization to elevate digital experiences and unlock consumer growth, engagement, advocacy and retention. So I'd like to welcome on stage Samir Saad, the Regional Sales and Marketing Director of Clever Tap. We have a short video explaining what Clever Tap does.
Most e-commerce apps lose 90% of new users in just 4 weeks. That's 90% of the money you were spending on acquisition campaigns wasted. Without focusing on retention, Brands are trying to fill a leaky bucket by acquiring users that don't stick around. This hurts key metrics like customer lifetime value, average order value, and churn rates. For blitz scaling growth, you need to build meaningful customer relationships that deepen brand loyalty over the long term. CleverTap, the world's leading customer engagement and retention platform, helps e-commerce brands convert, retain, and grow their user base by delivering a personalized shopping experience that keeps users engaged across the entire customer lifecycle. Leading e-commerce brands use CleverTap to automatically deliver personalized product recommendations and promotions. Re-engage and convert users who abandon carts, send back in-stock updates, send price drop alerts to targeted user segments, deliver a seamless omni-channel experience across physical and online stores, and much more. Join over 2,000 brands who use CleverTap to increase retention and grow their business. Visit clevertap.com to learn more.
Believe it or not, this is the first time I see this video. Very insightful. Hi everyone, my name is Sam Saad. I'm the Director of Sales for the Middle East, Turkey, and Africa region at CleverTap. For those of you who missed it, CleverTap is a marketing automation tool. You guys can't hear me? How about now? Great. So, as I was saying, CleverTap is a marketing automation tool that helps brands. Can't hear? Can we put the volume up, please? Test, test. Can you guys hear? Yeah? Great. So, for the third time, CleverTap, a marketing automation tool that helps brands analyze the user behavior across the apps, website, omni-channel as you heard, so offline data, ingest it, segment users accordingly, and then engage with them. The engagement happens across multiple channels. So today, I'm here to talk to you about hyper-personalization. And I'm going to explain how brands can climb the personalization ladder. What that enables them to do is deliver growth and retention. So without further ado, let's start off with the era we're in today. Today, we're in the hyper-personalization era. What this means is today's users, still not audible? How about now? All right, I'll just stand like this. So, we're in the era of hyper-personalization. Today's users expect brands to know what they want without even communicating it, without any signal or intent from their end. And because of that, it is the brand's responsibility to know, reach, communicate the right product at the right time, on the right channel, to any user that uses that brand. This is not the only reason why we're in the era of hyper-personalization. The other one is, today, there's a lot of disruption happening. A lot of industries are constantly changing. Just look at what happened during COVID. Everybody that was offline centered suddenly had a digital transformation team. Everyone was building apps. Everyone wanted websites. This and many other changes in the industry and the technology drove a lot of brands to change strategies at such a high pace that competitors were also allowed to enter. Why? Because the price of entering the market became a lot cheaper. Technology was doing the heavy lifting. The infrastructure played no part anymore. Everything is online. Everything is digitized. So, being in the era of hyper-personalization means brands had to stand out by speaking to users like best friends, people who know them. If I know you for years, then I know what you like. I know what to get you on your birthday. I know how to talk to you. It's that sort of communication that drives loyalty. And that is what I mean by hyper-personalization. So, what does it drive? I got you guys some stats from several surveys done. BCG, Boston Consulting Group, says that 110% of users are more likely to buy more things if a brand speaks to them in a personal manner. McKinsey says that 77% of people are annoyed if they get generic messages. Think of the last time you got a push notification for something you already bought. Hey, come buy this. Or, hey, come book this hotel. I think we can all refer to the booking.com example where you get the ad even after you've flown, came back, and shared all the photos on social media. So, growth is driven by hyper-personalization, and when you look at new users are more likely to buy if you talk to them on a one-to-one basis. And if you're not being generic in your communication, then you're going to drive retention. Those new users are going to do repeat orders. Repeat orders turn into advocacy because they like the brand. So they're going to spread the word about it. And that's the message that we're delivering here. This is no longer a nice to have. This is a must have. That said, why doesn't everybody have it? Because it's hard. There is a ton of data that needs to be ingested. This is not cheap. It's not easy. You need to collect it across multiple channels. You need to synchronize the data and make sure there are no discrepancies. And we all know the 10% benchmark is long gone. Discrepancies are causing a lot of issues. Data silos are causing brands a lot of headaches. And it is not enabling you. You are facing more difficulties in knowing who the customer is across the different touch points. Someone who buys something offline will still get a push notification asking them to buy that product online. So the volume of the data is an issue. Then the tech and the seamless communication across the tech partners is another issue. Then you have the problem of doing all this in real time. This requires immense speed. Servers, if you're relying on offline servers, it's going to cost you a fortune. And finally, for you to be able to communicate on a one-to-one basis, you need to be proactive. You need to know what they want, as I said, before they even know. And that poses a challenge. So, what does the ladder look like? At the very bottom, you have the demographic approach. I am a male, I am this and that years old, I have a dog. Great, that was good 10 years ago, 15 maybe. Then on top of that came behavioral segmentation. Oh, I just looked at this article. I just liked this video. That was also good 8 to 10 years ago. So the first basic layers are the layers we started with. And whilst they drove some form of engagement and personalization, it was still too generic. Every male in the age range of 20 to 34 was treated the same. I think Atani can testify to that, as I used to work with him in the Yahoo days. Then we started looking at behavior-triggered messaging. So I'm not looking at what you did in the past, I'm looking at what you're doing now. You just bought these running shoes, how about these shorts to go with them? That started to become personalized. But the final piece is the icing on the top, and this is the context. Not only am I giving you what you need in that right moment, I am also giving it to you as you, not as, hey sir, you just bought this and that. No, I'm addressing you by name. I know when you bought it, where, which geolocation you're in, where you're likely to go running based on your geolocation, and my communication to you is very tailored. The content is tailored, the name, everything. And that delivers a unique approach of a close friend. So I've put some examples of amazing stuff that happened in the past. This is what demographic segmentation looks like. A campaign run that says, big, tasty, and proud. It's the Maharaji burger. It's a vegetarian burger. This ad ran in India. 75% of Indians are non-vegetarian. Meanwhile, in the States, big, beefy bliss. 1 in 10 Americans are vegetarians. So what you're doing here is you're taking a generic message and you're alienating, you're stereotyping, and in an age where everybody wants to rant on social media, you don't want that. Behavior segmentation, this is what you did right now, so I know your history. Here's something based on that history. Again, like I said, it's great, but it's still generic. Finally, the behavior triggered, and actually I want to take a step back. The first 2 layers are done by most brands, 83%. The last 2 layers, you'll be surprised. They're rare to find. And if you look at the top 5, 10 brands that you really love, they all do this. That's why we're in this era. Users are expecting it. So when we talk about behavior triggered, we are talking about something that you're doing right this second. Netflix does a really good job at this. You just watch this, watch that. You like comedy, it's a Saturday, this is when you're chilling, watching a comedy movie, no one is. Here's something for you. And finally, content personalization. There is a really cool example on this. A ride-hailing app would send you a notification at, let's say, 6 p.m. This is when you usually order a cab, and tells you today is extra busy. So instead of 5 minutes waiting time, you're going to experience 15 to 20 minutes. They already know that you take a cab around this time. So they anticipate that you're going to be annoyed because the cab is going to take longer than usual. And that's why they proactively reach out to you. So instead of waiting for the discontent, they already preempt it. They let you know. And what this manifests as, you're super happy that they actually gave you the opportunity to plan around it. So, is it worth it going through all that trouble? Yes. We actually have a case study with an e-commerce brand. I'm not allowed to say who, but look at the image, you'll know who. They saw a 4 times boost in conversions. The guys were doing hyper-personalization at scale, and they have the numbers. So they were able to do it in real time for such a big data set and translated it into 68% increase in in-app traffic, 3 times the revenue. So it works. It's worth the hassle. What do you need to do to get there? 3 basic steps. First, you need to assess, not access, your current level on the personalization ladder. Where do you stand? How's your communication right now? Once you've identified that, that's when you need to look at the tech stack. Where are you getting your data from? What sort of synergies do you have across your partners? What can be done to consolidate, analyze that data in an efficient manner? Because having the right data about the customer is what you need to build the right strategy. When you build that right strategy, then you can hyper-personalize. And by the way, that you could do in an omni-channel manner. I leave you now with some photos of my dog. As I said, I'm a dog owner. And that's it.
Great. Thank you, Samir, for giving us such valuable insights into the world of hyper-personalization. That probably explains why I've been on the same holiday twice, having seen your presentation now, so thanks for explaining that. The skill of a good MC is to segue smoothly from one topic to another in a seamless manner. And until we find such an MC, I'll let you know. But in the meantime, our next topic of discussion is brand safety and suitability. The past few years have been dynamic for brands in terms of protecting their reputation amid an ever-changing news cycle. From the global pandemic to a highly polarized political rhetoric, it can be daunting to decide how your brand should appear in public, not to mention controlling where your ads are placed. To talk more about this topic and more, I am joined by an esteemed group of experts who I hope will lead to an insightful discussion on the subject. They will discuss the role verification plays in ensuring efficiency and effectiveness in media buying and strategies for navigating today's ever-changing digital landscape while meeting consumer expectations. So I'd like to welcome on stage Nick Reed, Abdunabi Aladdin, Geeta Gamagami, and Christos Solomon. Thank you all. And we're just going to show a short video from Double Verify to showcase their expertise in this area. Okay, thank you for coming on the stage and joining us for what we hope is a meaningful discussion on the topic and the future of the industry. Happy St. Patrick's Day to anybody who's Irish, by the way. Just remember the date. So if I could just ask you one by one to quickly introduce yourself and mention a buzzword or piece of jargon in the industry that you would like to get rid of forever and put in the trash can. Starting with you, Chris.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I'm Chris Salome. I'm the Chief Digital Officer for Omnicom Media Group. There's this word that I've just noticed that's creeping into lexicon. It's socialize, and it's when someone just means, can you send that email to lots of people? It just annoys the hell out of me. Like, socialize, we don't need that. You can just say, can you email me?
Hello, this is Abed from I'm the regional lead for Minad for digital planning and investment. The buzzword, I think, which I want to move to trash or recycle bin is viral. Believe it or not, we started to hear people again talking about it. I want my video to go viral.
Pretty much everything's viral nowadays, right? Geeta?
Hello, everyone. First, thank you very much for having us here. Again, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Nadeem and Austin. Sorry, Justin.
Already, I think we've lost. I'm off.
For hosting us today. My name is Geeta Qaimagami. I'm the leader of communication and CR at Grohe. I'm managing the Middle East. My career started with advertising 20 years ago when there was no digital and social media. I think digital and social media grew on me. The buzzword I want to get rid of is new normal, actually.
Neo-normal.
We are hearing so much about new normal that we lost the definition what it means. we are back to the normal. So that's from us.
Good one, thank you. And Nick.
Morning, guys. Oh, gosh. Morning, guys. My name is Nick Reed. I'm SVP of Double Verify. I'm responsible for Europe. The word I'd like to get rid of is performance. I don't think you can differentiate between performance and brand. Everything should drive an outcome regardless. So remove the word performance and think about outcomes.
Okay, good point, performance. You won't hear me say that today, hopefully. Okay, so diving straight into our questions, I wanted to ask you, how much of a role do quality factors play in your client's media strategy, particularly when it comes to brand safety, ad fraud, and viewability? Chris, if I could start with you.
Yeah, I mean, if they don't, they should. We embarked on a big journey last year on Omnicom to make it front and center of our process. Big thanks to Nick and his team as well, because DV are a big partner of ours, and they helped us a lot on that journey. And the first thing that we noticed, outside of getting rid of the trash, the fraud, and you move beyond getting rid of the stuff that's harmful, and you start looking at more nuanced metrics like attention and viewability, you start to realize that the market isn't right pricing for quality. And when you do start pricing for quality, you see good things happening. And we came to this amazing insight, which is if someone sees your ad, that's actually quite important. So, it sounds so obvious, but I don't think the industry was quite taking that as a signal and a factor that they should have been optimizing against. I think that's changing now. I definitely think that's changing now. I think brands understand that, buy cheap, buy twice. Paying for quality does deliver better outcomes. I'm really happy with how the conversation in our industry's turning and talking a lot more about this topic, because I think even 2 years ago I don't think it was high enough on the agenda. Now it is, and I think now it's become table stakes.
Abdul Nabi.
I would like to start with a quote by David Ogilvy. No matter how the ad is good, it has to drive results. So great ads, great creative, great videos. As Chris was saying, it's very important people are seeing this ad. So what if no one is seeing the ad or it's not in the right environment? So it's not driving results, it's not driving anything. And I guess in the past 1 to 2 years, it's very important to factor in such elements in order to have apple-to-apple comparison across platforms. At the end of the day, 5-6 years ago, efficiency was the key for most of the clients. So lowest CPM, lowest CPC, lowest CPV. But what if this CPM is not qualitative enough, or it's not driving anything? COVID, no matter, it's a pandemic, it was bad. However, it had one positive impact, in my opinion. It made brands care about brand safety and the environment they are appearing in. It started by brands, they don't want to appear next to a negative content, and that's how it started. All the brands tapping into this concept, I would say, which should be a must in every single plan, but it wasn't there, especially for brands who did not want to invest in non-working media because they considered that as non-working media.
Good point, Geeta. If I can move on to you.
I think I'm going to give an example on the brand that I'm working, Grohe. Quality, technology, innovation, and sustainability is at the heart of whatever we do. For example, if we develop a communication campaign, we make sure that it evolves around the quality, brand quality, and brand ethic. And it is important for us to implement the highest measurement on content safety and brand safety when we communicate online. And we do that with the help of a specialized agency, social media agency, and legal team, definitely, to make sure that our messaging are reaching the right consumer. I also have to say that quality, brand quality is at the heart. We are heart of Grohe. We are a true believer of quality, and that is felt with the trust that consumer they have towards the brand. To do that, we have 2 steps. First is the legacy protection. If you look at our communication on our platforms, you can see that everywhere in every communication, quality and sustainability come very strongly as a messaging. and sustainability and quality is the legacy of the brand. The second step is the baseline protection. It means, for example, if we have advertising, we make sure that we implement pre-bid solution for specific contents using keyword selection to block the content to ensure that we don't fall to false information and make sure that the right content reach right consumer.
Nick, we could.
I love the fact that we use the word media quality in so many words. I think for a long time we didn't think about that. For a long time we thought about price. And you don't know what you don't know. So you need to start at some point, therefore you need to measure it. And understanding media quality is a baseline of where you should begin when it comes to planning and execution and driving outcomes. And when we started on this journey, I think brand safety was where we started. We talked about ads being delivered in bad or poor content. That's evolved and moved on. We think about nuances of suitability and how that's different with each brand. And I think kind of the market needs to understand kind of where we are now if we're to plan where we want to be and how we drive outcomes and business return on investment. You talked about price earlier. That's not the starting point. It's how do I drive value and return on investment.
Good point. Price tends to get in the way sometimes of common sense. So moving on, our second question. Do you believe that brand safety, fraud and verification concerns are equally prevalent across all media channels, including emerging channels like CTV? Should we start with Abdonal?
Sure. In the past, I would say for 24 months, again, brand suitability, brand safety, ad fraud started to be a hot topic, which should be across all the platforms. Lots of brands were or platforms, I would say, were concerned. And that raises a big question mark, to be honest. Platforms do not accept any third-party verification. That should raise a question mark not only for the agency, but also for the advertisers. Where my ad is appearing and how people are perceiving my ad, or is it in the right ecosystem or environment? CTV is, I'm really excited for the next panel to see where we are heading with CTV. I still think it's a gray area. It's important that at the end of the day, it's another screen. You had your mobile, desktop, or tablet. Now it's another screen. But how to measure it and where to measure it, that's a big question mark. We'd love to partner with partners who can help us not only serve our ads on CTV, but serve it to the right consumer. At the end of the day, CTV in specific, it's very important to measure, not only to measure, but also to ensure serving the ad in the right ecosystem and environment, because it's somehow a group approach. So basically people watch TV as a family. So you really don't want your ad to be seen, let's say, by kids, especially if you are an adult brand. So yeah, that's very important and to start looking at that from that angle in the future.
And can I ask Chris the same question, please?
I think each channel has its own. Yeah, I think each channel has its own unique set of problems. CTV is a really interesting one, and Nick will probably be able to hopefully back this up. Whenever you see issues like fraud, it's always a smart idea to follow the money. I think one of the things that we saw in CTV is that a lot of it's built on the backbone of the open web, and prices for CTV and CPMs are really, really high, and consequently it attracts bad players. And so the types of fraud that you see in each space are unique. So in the CTV space, levels of fraud were so high because it was so lucrative, and it became really, really simple and easy to spoof server-side IDs. So it became really tricky for buyers in the market because they think that they're buying, they could be buying Sky TV or quality inventory. You're actually not. It's fake. It's not real. And that's why when you are a buyer, you have to understand the ecosystem you're buying in. You really need to get into the weeds and understand the tech behind it and how it can be, how that technology can be manipulated by bad players. I think the solution to it was really similar to the solution with open web, which is have really, really good relationships and direct relationships with your publishers. We saw this, I think, in the early days of open web, where there was a temptation just to buy, because it was quick and easy to buy across the open internet. But unfortunately, that a lot of it just wasn't real. That there was this enormous amount of traffic, and at some point you sense check yourself and say, well, there aren't that many eyeballs in the world. Who is actually watching? Who do you know that's going on these long tail sites that you've never heard of? Truth is, no one. And so that's what we saw, I think in our company anyway, we saw a migration towards having better, close relationships with publishers, paying for quality. The same trend happened with CTV. And so I think my advice to buyers in the marketplace with emerging channels is just learn from the mistakes of the past. CTV is about to explode in our region. A lot of the big players are going to be hopefully launching their own ad-funded products. And I'd say work directly with all of them. Know who you're speaking to. Make sure that there is someone you can pick up the phone to and call on the other side. And it's not just an anonymous deal that you set up on your DSP. And so just be cognizant and conscious that brand suitability and fraud is unique to each channel. Each one has its nuances. You can't apply the same rules that you do on open web that you do for CTV. The problems in social are in and of themselves unique. The issues that you might see on meta platforms are different to the ones that you see on Twitter. So it's important that you do have people in your organization that understand and a specialist in it, because the damage that some of this stuff does can be enormous. And it's not just damage to your brand, it's damage to your P&L. Because, typically a media investment is one of the biggest line items of any company's P&L each year. We were speaking to a client, God, I can't remember when I had this conversation with him, but it was only a few weeks ago. And he said, that the second most expensive line item on our P&L is media. The first one is steel. And if you're spending enormous amounts of money on media, you probably should make sure that the media you're buying is real. I don't know any other industry in the world where we would tolerate this. Imagine if you're buying a commodity like steel and you find out it's actually not steel, but copper, or just not steel at all. No other industry would tolerate that. So I'm really happy that the industry started to kind of wake up and take notice on this.
You make some good points. And Nick, what's your take on that?
Chris has nailed it really. Media wastage is a thing, right? Whether that's kind of fraud, whether that's viewability, whether that's brand suitability, out of geolocation, all these things are real. And unless you start to measure and understand everything, then you won't be in a place where actually you're seeing return on investment. And kind of that's how brand safety, suitability has evolved. Bench lines of media quality is where you start. If you want to see return on investment, you need to think about responsible investment. You need to think about kind of where you're delivering your ads, who you're delivering ads to, and the environments that you're delivering that ad. And that's where kind of safety has evolved to suitability. What's suitable for a bank is different to an FMCG, for example. So making sure you understand the environment is absolutely key. When we think about CTV, as Chris says, kind of, the fraud follows where the money is. The other thing in CTV as well is over 20% of ads are actually being delivered when the TV's off, right? So 20% of your investment on CTV is being delivered when that TV is off. So again, unless you start to measure, you can't understand. And unless you have that measurement and transparency, you don't know if that responsible investment is driving return on investment. So it's something we all need to be conscious of. Again, in this market, it's again different in terms of benchmarks compared to the overall global benchmarks. So for example, fraud in this region is actually over double than it is on the global average. When it comes to viewability, it's at 65%, rest of the world 75%. So again, that's reflective that people aren't measuring the media activity. When you start to measure, you start to understand actually where's my money going to, and how do I remove the, excuse my language, crap, and how do I start to optimize and invest in return investment in terms of good quality media.
Excellent. So we've probably touched on this a little bit, but brand safety shouldn't be mistaken for brand suitability. And interesting, when we put this presentation together, people said, do you mean sustainability surely, and it's no, we mean suitability. So people, do get mistake. So is it a common problem, and what's the difference? Geeta, look like you want to.
I think both of them, they are interchangeable, but they have different scopes. When it comes to brand safety, it's the measures that the company take to protect the brand. In communication, we look at the PR planners, social media planners very meticulously to make sure that the content is in line with our brand identity and brand guidelines. And also to protect the brand reputation, it's very important to use smart tools to listen to conversation, because it's important for you to know that what consumer they talk about you, and we ensure what we say is in line with what consumers say. When it comes to brand suitability, I think there is more direction to creating positive messages, moving from negative messages, and it's brand safety is at the heart. Brand suitability builds on brand safety to create more positive messages and identity for the brand.
Abdul Nabi, what's your take on this?
I really think when it comes to brand safety versus brand suitability, brand safety, it's a base. So you need to appear within a safe environment or brand safe environment, but it's not everything. Going back to next point, what's suitable for a bank might not be suitable for a CPG brand. And that's the role of, I would say, specialists or the agency to advise the advertisers. Advertisers, all what they would think about, I want to protect my brand. But what if your brand is protected, but it's not suitable or it's not relevant to the audience? That's when I would say the industry needs to move, and that's not only an initiative from one agency versus the other. It has to be a collective decision where we all move to something called, let's say, a quality CPM or suitable CPM cost metrics. That's basically when we really don't buy the media if it's not within a suitable environment. This is how we save money, because at the end of the day, if you look at the plans or the costs, yes, it's higher. However, if we look at the end results, which is your ROAS or ROI, it's technically your effective cost is lower because you are driving really revenue and profitability to the client. Chris has said the second line on a P&L is cost of media. But if this media is being spent on a wasted environment, or we had massive waste, so we'd rather just kill it from the P&L, which does not make sense. So yes, we need to take a collective decision. Let's move the whole industry, because if we don't take that initiative, we will stick to the old metrics, and we'll stick to some advertisers think paying additional cost will technically hit the P&L from an expense perspective, but technically it's not.
Absolutely. Nobody likes wastage, whatever the industry. Chris, suitability, safety. How do you see it?
One is something no one wants to be around, and suitability is a personal preference for a brand. Brand safety is, you know what? I saw a great post once on this. It was the founder of Essence, who was a competitor, but he wrote a beautiful article about the hierarchy of brand safety, and he said, tip of the spear is the same as the Hippocratic Oath. It's do no harm, right? That's the first thing. Do no harm, and then you build on top of that. The tip of the spear of that pyramid is the do no harm bit. Is make sure your advertising doesn't appear against inappropriate content that everyone would find offensive, regardless of the brand. Suitability is specific to each client and each brand. Our client Unilever has really clear guidelines about the content they want to appear against and don't want to appear against. We have clients who have a whole different set of content that they feel is not suitable for their brand. It's pretty simple. It's like brand safety, bad for everyone. Suitability is a personal preference. The other thing that's really, really important when it comes to brand suitability is when you are running content, depending on the channel you use, it's important to understand what kind of adjacency control that you have. So you have the open web, and then you have the different social platforms. They all have different settings and capabilities, some better than others. So when we say adjacency control, it's the ability to turn off and turn on what kind of content you want your brand to appear against. It's the same with same topic I mentioned before, which is understand the nuances of each platform when it comes to brand measurement. It's the same with brand suitability. So what Meta allows you to do is different to Snap, is different to Twitter. But it's important that you understand, if brand suitability is really important for you, have someone in your org who's a specialist who understands how to turn on and turn off certain dials on content you want to appear against.
I think it's a context thing, right? If you think about third-party verification, 10 years ago, it's like insurance. It wasn't particularly exciting, but that concept of brand safety has evolved to suitability. Okay, I don't want to be there, but what environments do I want to be in? And actually, kind of part of that is the consumer. Consumers have expectations now of brands to be associated with relevant content. They have concerns around brands being delivered against misinformation or disinformation, for example. And actually, the industry itself, thankfully, I think, is moving from brand suitability to kind of brand integrity. So in other words, actually, we think about sustainability. We think about diversity, inclusion. All these things are driving how we invest responsibly when it comes to our media, because not just brands, but the consumer have that expectation that brands should be associating themselves with the right content, the right environments. And that's good for essentially the entire ecosystem.
I believe that there is an issue also within the big organization that there is not alignment between different departments. Digital marketing, they perform something, communication does something else, advertising agencies or the agencies, they understand something. So having kind of, working together to make sure that the content we are communicating, it's the same across all the channels at the same time. That's very important.
So it sounds like it's very fragmented, the market there between all of the
Surprisingly, sometimes it's very fragmented. It's marketing, they do communication, they do advertising, and at the same time, we have different brand values. So marketing is talking about one brand value, one, category, and the PR is talking about something else completely. It doesn't mean they are wrong, but they are talking about different things at same time to the consumer. So it's important to unify the messaging across different channels.
It's challenging, right? The ecosystem is complex. We've spoken about the platforms and the open web. You kind of, unless you start measuring, you can't compare. So how do you understand if you can't measure apples for apples? Because you need to understand and compare. Otherwise, how you can invest responsibly? But it is challenging. But the best place to start is, okay, measuring media quality. Where do I start? Where's my baseline? I need my baseline to be an ad that's seen, it's seen by a human being, it's seen in a relevant environment, it's seen in the right ecosystem in the country. That's a baseline of media quality. From there, I can start to say, okay, how do I invest more and where do I invest more? You need to start with the baseline of media quality.
Absolutely. So, Abdullah, were you going to add something there? Or?
It's similar to your car insurance. You have to pay for it to protect you, technically, if you had, God forbid, an accident. So technically, it's a must. It's like your health insurance, it's your car insurance. It's an additional cost you are paying, but technically it has a massive benefit versus so benefit versus cost is massive.
Absolutely. So we've seen a dramatic change in consumer behavior over the last few years. How have advertisers adapted to that when it comes to their media strategies? Chris, can we start with you?
Yeah. I don't know if we necessarily have seen permanent change. We had a company event a few days ago and we were looking at some interesting charts about the impact that, say, COVID had on consumers in the last 2-3 years. And I remember at the time everyone was saying everything's different, blah, blah, blah. But when you actually look at what's the permanent change been, it's been surprising at what's just regressed back to norm. If you look at, say, e-commerce as a business, everyone started buying online. They bought online because they had to. But if you look at the growth of e-commerce, it's regressed back to its growth rate. So if COVID hadn't happened, it would have been exactly where it is today. It's the same with a lot of other consumer behavior. I use this quote all the time. It's my favorite quote in advertising. It's by Bill Bernbach, and he talks about human beings, and he talks about something called the unchanging man. People don't really change that much. We haven't changed that much. Events around the world cause you to maybe behave differently by, in I think, a less meaningful way. So I think consumers, the things that really drive them, the thing that is biology, and that hasn't really changed. You have the same wants, you have the same needs. So I'm always wary of people that talk about big change, because I think it tends to have an agenda behind it. You're selling something, whereas marketers are meant to understand human beings and consumers, and I don't think they have changed that much. The one trend that seems to be permanent because of what's happened with the pandemic is our attitude to work and working in an office. People have really pushed back and been resistant about that, but most other consumer trends haven't changed that much.
Geeta, can I bring you in? What do you think about what Chris said?
We're talking about the consumer change. I see a trend of consumers losing trust. I think there are statistics that 40% last 2 years, they lost trust to the brands. And that's obvious because of the communication that brands they have with the consumers. You can see how many irrelevant advertisement and posts every day you see in your platforms, and that's the connection between the brand suitability and the trust that we create for the consumer. We speak everywhere, every different platforms with different target consumers, and we lose the trust. So I think if we can call it consumer behavior or a trend that consumers, they don't trust brands on e-commerce and online, it's something that we have to consider to address.
I think it's the consumer expectation. We see that, especially during the pandemic, because of the increase in consumer usage, there's an expectation that brands should be in a responsible environment. There's expectation that brands should be associated with the right content. You look at Europe, for example, you look at ad blocking, you look at GDPR, it's a reflection of the fact that the last 25 years as an industry, we've been building technology to chase the consumer around the internet. They've been frustrated by that, and there's the backlash, right? So if we are to move forward, we need to understand the consumer expectations and deliver upon those expectations. And that again is around responsible investment. It's also understanding, okay, what does that mean when it comes to engaging and targeting and reaching your audiences? All these things have changed and evolved, not fundamentally, we've just moved on, thankfully, and evolved in the right way.
I do think we tend to forget sometimes that we are dealing with human beings, not commodities. Again, echoing what all the panels have been saying, though. So if there is a change, it's a media consumption. It's not a consumer change. And it's a normal change, like moving from linear TV to connected TV, moving from traditional to digital. That's the normal trend which we have been seeing for the past 25 years. It's just a matter we have been reading a lot or doing lots of researches in the past 2 or 3 years to prove that a consumer habit has changed, but technically it has not. So at the end of the day, we need to hear back, like going back to the point of audience, people losing trust in brands, people losing trust in advertisements. So which was there all over the time, so hasn't changed. So now it's just a matter of brands talking in a personalized manner, I would say, with the customers, with the people, again, not with commodities. It has to continue. Now, it was a good shock for the advertisers and the agencies, but nothing has changed on the consumer level.
Nick make a good remark about tools to chase people all over the internet, so which brings us on to our final questions about attention measurement, why it's so important, and if we're getting it right. Nick, if we can start with you.
We kind of have a scarcity of attention. We've spent years overexposing the consumer and not really thinking about how we deliver personalized experiences that matter. The way in which the industry is moving, and again, attention is not a new concept. We've been trying to drive attention since we created advertising 50 plus years ago, right? How do we think about how we utilize attention in a way that kind of brings meaningful investment? How do we think about how we drive attention and what that has a role in? To do that, you need to start the baseline of media quality. There's no point thinking about attention if your ad's delivered in fraud or is not viewable. So you need to start with a baseline of media quality. And from that, how do I understand attention? How do I understand what that delivers to the consumer? Then once you start to measure attention, again, how do I optimize towards that? And what we're starting to do now is optimize towards attention to help drive and return on investment in terms of traditional KPIs. But again, we talk a lot about attention. It's not new, but how do we start to think about what that is? Exposure, engagement, what does that mean? What does that do in terms of the consumer? Because what we're trying to do, and rightfully so, is really drive exactly that, exposure and drive engagement and attention to the consumer.
I think last time I had a meeting with the social media agency on the same subject of attention. They said that the average consumer, they scroll down on his Instagram to the size of Eiffel Tower per day. So that was shocking to me. Imagine that we consume so much on platforms online, but really, do we have time to pay attention? So that's for companies, for brands, very important to understand the moment that they can grasp consumer attention online. So that comes to the content that is really relevant to the consumer, a space that we advertise and we communicate. We know our target consumer properly, to whom we are communicating and why we are communicating. And I think asking consumer about feedback is very important to understand what they want. Google does it very interestingly. They ask question on YouTube. They run it to understand consumer feedback. We do that also at Girohe. We use the smart tools to understand the consumer feedback to make sure that we communicate with them in a way that we have their attention.
Abu Dhabi, yeah.
Last week we had an, I would say, exciting debate within the IB workstream, which Chris and I are on, about attention. Attention's been there for so long, but who is responsible to drive attention? Is it the brand? Is it the creative agency? Or is it the media agency? Or is it the media owner or the media partner? And it somehow shifted to a kind of blame. It started with a blame, but at the end of the day, we reached to a point, everyone is responsible to drive creative, which basically make the people or the consumer watch it. So it's the role of the creative agency to have a story-based creative to the consumer. It's the role of the media agency to choose the right platform and serving the ads within the right environment. And it's the role of the media owner to provide that, I would say, environment for everyone. And it's the role for the brand and the advertiser to start thinking about consumers before they think a brand. So it's not always the case of having your logo and your product at the beginning, which might basically make the people shy out from, and they don't serve your, don't watch your ad or don't engage with your ad. So it's a collective decision. It has to be and such initiatives got back all the stakeholders on one table before an ad, a piece of ad is being created. Because at the end of the day, if the ad is not driving result and not driving ROI, so we'd rather not to spend that dollar on media.
As you said, it's a collective decision, which if only you could just blame it on one person, it'd be so much easier than have so many stakeholders having to answer this. So now, thank you very much for answering those questions. We'll now leave it to the floor. If anyone's got any questions, please raise your hand. We'll bring you a mic, and you can ask our esteemed panelists anything you want within reason. Okay, we've got. Yeah. We just borrow one of your mics. Sorry.
Absolutely both. Absolutely both. And again, that is a reflection of how the industry has evolved. Right, go back 10 years. There was a concern, I would say, from brands around lack of transparency. So to begin with. Businesses like ourselves work with brands because they wanted to have transparency. They wanted to make sure their media was being invested in the right way. Thankfully, we've moved on, and actually, absolutely, the agencies are pioneering in this space. We believe that agencies can differentiate themselves through the way in which they work with businesses like DV. So in other words, agencies are responsible for managing the brand's equity, integrity, right? So making sure that that brand's investment is being delivered in the right place. That helps retain that client, also kind of helps grow that client. In other words, if you're delivering the ad in the right place, you're removing media wastage. You're delivering and investing that media responsibly in the right environments. That does helps brand integrity. That's what an agency is responsible for. You're then using that data to drive outcomes in the pre-bid environments. So agencies themselves are absolutely pioneering and pushing this space. So we work with both to answer your question.
Thanks for your question. Any other questions? Just briefly, if I could ask, because we've got Grohe here, a luxury brand. Geeta, do you have a higher standard, do you think, when it comes to safety and suitability, given where the brand sits, or treats just the same as any other brand?
Definitely. I think one of the most important brand values that we have is quality, and that goes across everything we do, from the production to the end consumer. So it's very important. And I don't think it's just for our brand. It should matter for everybody. It does not matter if they are an international brand or they are small businesses. You have to consider the quality at the heart of what you deliver to your consumers. So.
Excellent. That's a great place to leave it. So if we could all just put our hands together for our panelists and thank you for their time. Thank you. Thanks again for our panelists. So now we move on to our second panel, which covers the emergence of connected TV, CTV, as a major advertising platform. The panel will look at budgets, how CTV is different to online video, and comparisons with other markets. It will also look at advertising formats and strategies, and what we can learn from the past 20 years of digital ads. You'll be pleased to know that I won't be moderating this panel, and I'll leave you in the capable hands of someone more accomplished than me. So can I welcome on stage the IAB's Richard Fitzgerald, who is also the CEO and founder of Augustus Media, who will be moderating the panel. And also Dylan Templehead from Publicis Media, Zainib Karaki from Google, and Celine Gaultier-Darnis from Equative. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good to be at a business breakfast, briefing breakfast with Campaign, especially talking about one of my favorite topics, connected TV, with an esteemed panel. We actually know each other well because, as Justin mentioned, that we are also on the IAB. I'm on the board, and we run the CTV task force on the emerging platforms channels committee, and so we've interest in seeing how CTV is growing in the region, and we will talk a bit about that, but I want to just ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and how their companies, many of you will know their companies, but how they're particularly approaching connected TV advertising.
So thank you everyone for coming on a Friday morning as well. My name's Dylan. I'm the head of Precision, which is the programmatic trading arm for Publicis Group in MENA. And I think the way that we're approaching CTV is with an air of caution. There's a lot of grey, as Abdul was saying earlier in the first panel. CTV is still a bit of a gray area for us in the region, whereas in other markets like the US and in some ways the UK, it's a more established channel. Here, there's still quite a lot that we need to understand a little bit more. So we're taking it with a little bit of a cautious approach, like any other emerging channel, where we're kind of testing the water with what we understand now, where we see it being in the future, and how it fits in with the wider approach for planning media strategies in the future for our clients.
Hello everyone, thank you Campaign Middle East, thank you Nadim. Happy to be on stage with my panelists. Thank you Richard, thank you. Guys, I'm Céline Gauthier, I guess you believe that I'm French, from Equative, which is an independent ad monetization platform. So, and I'm in charge of a little teeny part of the world, MENAT and APAC, so I'll let you imagine 28 countries. As much as many culture, as much as many language, as much as many red card. So it's quite like intense. So how do we approach at a global level our the organization about CTV? So actually we have a strong ambition. We proved it due to our recent strategic investment on server-side ad assertion, so SSAI technology. To definitely like complete our full stack, SSP and ad server. So actually, we are directly connected with the supply, directly connected with the demand, and the supply has been is quite fragmented on a connected TV actually. So we have the content owner, we have the broadcaster, we have the telco. We have as well the sport distribution and the new family, I would say, that are the EOM, which is like original equipment manufacturer like LG and Samsung. So we cover the supply, and I would say that we are quite holistic because we cover supply, we cover the techno, SSP again, as I say, and SSI, and we cover the demand as well. So on the demand side, we do believe that connected TV must be addressable to just bring much more efficiency at the campaign level. So what do I mean by addressable? So connected TV must be premium, connected TV must be contextual, connected TV must be addressable. Premium means definitely quality, fraud. And we, on top of that, we do believe that, as we mentioned on the previous panel, so we are missing like measurement. So we do believe that through new features like interactivity, data as well, and also retargeting, we can definitely like enhance more measurement on connected TV.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, everyone, for being here and for hosting us for today. So my name is Zainab Karaki. I'm the head of digital marketing transformation covering the MENA region. So our intake as Google on the CTV front. So I'm not here more or less to sell or upsell our DSP platform, but our job as a Google is to be more or less at the forefront of what is happening new in the technological ecosystem or technology in particular. So YouTube is one of the key CTV platforms that probably mostly streamed across the world. But also part of our objective is to bring on board other third-party players from the CTV ecosystem to make sure that we have this holistic approach into a much more multi-screen sort of an experience. So our value proposition when we come into our advertisers or to the agencies is that the most important thing is to have a sort of a consolidated approach. Once this approach is in place, then this means that we own the data. As an advertiser, you own the data. And as an advertiser, you will be able to integrate this data, analyze it, and come up with some measurement sort of solutions. Because ultimately, the way we advance is how we use the insights. And this is why having this sort of really consolidated approach will make it slightly much easier for the advertiser to come up with more meaningful learnings. Now, we think that CTV is an absolute, must-buy to each TV audiences at scale. And we think that both these platforms are complementary to each other. We're not here also to say that they will be replacing one another, but they are complementary to one another. If you want to reach these specific, let's say, light TV viewers within Generation Z, then I think this is where we need to really start thinking about what would be the alternative to what people are watching on TV, specifically for this adult people between the age of 18 to 49. Now, how can we reach them in a much more exciting way? This is what CTV also can offer, which is this add-on set of engagement extensions, these sort of brand extensions that have these call to action that will make it slightly more interesting, like maybe scanning a QR code, sending a link to a phone, but ultimately just to showcase more or less that there is differentiation in the way we deal with CTV versus TV on that level. So finally, on that element, I think if we approach it from this multi-screen objective and embed to it this advanced audience targeting with call to action and the cross-device frequency, I think this will make sure that it will make it a bit more valuable and more impactful as well to the client.
Great, thank you, Sam. Thank you all for introduction. I think one of the things about a new place to buy ads or a new place for a medium of consumption of media is usually the experts sort of come later. But I think with CTV, as you see from the panel and from previous panel and from the people in the room, there's a lot of expertise with companies across the ecosystem in connected TV advertising, but the consumption isn't there yet. And on the IAB, we produced a report that showed that there's 50 OTT services in the region since 2011. 5 are pure AVOD, 10 are hybrid between AVOD and SVOD. So 15 of the 50 can serve ads, but we don't have a statistic on how much ad spend is on CTV yet. We also assume that the smart TV devices, the OEMs, and that's one way to consume ads or consume connected TV advertising. The other way is to cast from a mobile device onto a regular TV just through internet. So one can have apps, another one can be casted. But in that sense, we think the region is probably around 20% penetration. There's a stat from the US that 94% of households are reachable with connected TV programmatic advertising on those devices. That's 31% year-over-year increase, 22 versus 21, and 4x growth in 3 years. Another statistic is that 237% year-on-year ad market growth for LG devices. And Salim mentioned the regional manufacturers. This is a huge opportunity, and that's what's interesting about CTV, is that this isn't the same playbook as mobile. In mobile, there was 2 operating systems. With smart TVs, every manufacturer wants their own operating system, so it's a different playbook. So that's one of the differences between how ads and how to approach it. And to that, just to set the scene on that, I just want to ask each a specific question. So Dylan, particularly, from a publicist and from a media buying and inventory point of view, what are you seeing the differences between MENA at the moment and the rest of the world? Okay, sorry.
So yeah, good question. The rest of the world, I think, depending on what you look at for the rest of the world, US and UK, as I said before, is a far more established region or regions when it comes to the amount of available inventory in those markets. So the broadcasters have turned their attention to the streaming services and the ability to I guess, serve ads in a real-time environment. Whereas here we've got maybe a handful, as you say, of real available inventory supply partners, whereas there may be 50, but there's only a handful that are advertising served or available from a programmatic standpoint, which is where I'm most focused. If you look at the manufacturers and you have a relationship with, say, the LGs and Samsungs, where you can work with them to serve ads on their smart TV devices like that, in terms of not just video, but in-app kind of imagery as well, then yes, that broadens the amount of available reach, but it's not something that's really widely adopted at this point. we're still kind of playing around with some of the clients that we work with. Is this a viable environment for that brand? When it comes to YouTube, I mean, that's the largest part of the inventory availability in this region. And I was sat within one of the QBR sessions with one of our clients, and one of my team was taking the clients through it. And a large part of that conversation for the delivery is how much of that inventory is served on a CTV environment. So the conversations are coming up more frequently within our clients in the way that they look at the not just the environments, but the models of devices that are being shown on the ads that they're running. So yeah, from the rest of the world versus MENA, we're catching up. We're doing a good job to learn as quickly as possible, because it is an emerging channel, and it's something that we shouldn't be ignoring. We should be focusing attention on. There's, as Celine was saying, there's a lot more going on when it comes to the inventory and supply equative, and obviously with Google and YouTube, there's a much larger focus now on how we approach CTV in the region.
Thanks, Dylan. And Celine, is this on? Yeah, sorry, I'm not sure if it's on. Okay, 2 mics. Yeah, so to that point, and kind of bringing on the conversation from the last panel about measurement, and in terms of monetization, what are the questions that people should be asking around measurement, and how are you viewing that?
Sure. So actually, in terms of measurement, marketers, they should ask actually like what they ask on the media, like a regular online campaign. Definitely, but what they missed first for the one that they come from the broadcasting and linear TV, which is to unify the measurement, which is number one. Definitely what they look for is what I mentioned previously, which is the engagement. So far, of course, on connected TV, smart TV, you get like amazing viewability, you get amazing completion, but when it's come to measurement in terms of like proper engagement, so this is what we still to probably make some like effort to see how we can track better that.
So are the same metrics, will we be talking about viewability with CTV? Is it automatically assumed that it's 100%? The language around that, do we talk about it in the same way?
Alors, definitely from our perspective, yes, to be honest. And back on your previous question, Richard, about like MENA compared to the rest of the world. So even if we feel the heat and the traction, either from the demand as well from the supply, so we are far from what we offer already, of course, in EMEA and US. Definitely, but I mean, it's all about direct sales here. No programmatic, lack of AVOD. So it's definitely in terms of measurement, we are still not there yet, but this is why it's an exciting time also for MENA to build, like a CPM, make like, publishers safe about like their content, and definitely like ensure the brand that we will be able to track properly that kind of metric and measurement.
Amazing. Not to put you on the spot, but I was intrigued by something that Nick mentioned on the last panel, that 20% of ads served on CTV are while the TV is off. How can that happen? Do you know how that might happen?
You're asking me. I don't. Honestly, I have no idea. Okay. Yeah, but again, it's coming the measurement side of things as well from from traditional TV. You're looking at when adverts were on. That's when people usually walked away from the sitting position, going to go grab a drink from the fridge or make a sandwich or whatever. They use that time to be away from the TV. Whereas now, obviously with the digitalization of ads being served, there's a skippable element. So yes, they are visible, but are they viewing complete to the end of the advert? So there is that element as well that we need to understand. So yeah, measurement is
important.
Definitely important.
Yeah. Okay. And Zainab, so I think it's something Dylan mentioned about YouTube, and at the moment, one of the ways, especially with Google, that obviously with the ability with YouTube, that you can add it on to a video buy. So you can select on YouTube that you want the ad served specifically in addition on a connected TV device. How do you think people are, are they aware that they're selecting CTV? Is it automatic that the ads would be served across multiple devices, and what's the awareness around that?
Yeah, so from that angle, just to be very transparent, I think a lot of the advertisers or the clients, they enable all devices on their campaigns just to make sure that they are able to capture all the opportunity from a reach angle. And ultimately, last year, we were on our Google Ad Manager specific platform, and also within YouTube itself, we witnessed a 3 times increase in terms of CTV ad requests. Which was slightly a bit more surprising for us versus mobile. So this is where we go into our client and to the agency, and we highlight to them or bring it on the table that this is an important device to have from an incrementality of reach sort of an approach. And ultimately, one of the things that we're also trying to really put on the table is that when you enable all devices and you're really bidding on open auction, ultimately, the more reach you have, the more cost-effective you become. And add on to it the targeting opportunity of reaching selected kind of audiences, which might more or less also bring in this precision that would allow you to be a bit more personalized in your approach when you're reaching this specific target audience. So ultimately, at the moment right now, it's a holistic sort of a multi-screen experience that we're trying to ask the client to really adopt. In order to be a bit more broader, but at the same time specific to what actually they want to reach. But this is in a nutshell what we are trying to really gather on from our knowledge and study of the device itself.
Okay, thank you. A more general question for everyone is, do you think that connected TV is going to be a separate line item in planning, in advertising planning, or is it like mobile and social, or is it sort of incremental on top of video? In terms of ad budgets, will there be more ad budgets allocated to digital video, or will the ad budgets move from traditional TV linear ad spots onto CTV? What's your view on that?
Yes, it should be. The way that ad formats and ads are, I guess, running through, say, a smart TV or CTV environment versus a normal online video, say, on a mobile device is very different. So with the mobile devices or on a desktop, you're usually running short form video, whereas on a smart TV environment, you are able to run a more long form ad, like a traditional TV ad, like a 1 minute, in some cases, TV spot. So yes, you should be approaching it from a different perspective because they're going to be doing different things. With the OTT or the online video environments, that you can have more interactive, engaging content, or in terms of the formats themselves, where you can click on an element, or it's a shoppable type of ad format. Whereas on a CTV or smart TV device, it's more of your traditional attention, branding and awareness for like a linear TV. So I think it will be complementary to your normal TV, and in some cases where advertisers don't have the budgets to run the big TV commercial TV spot buys, then they will look at a smart TV or a CTV environment because it's more less of a cost barrier in that sense, and they can be more dynamic with the types of videos that they can put into rotation rather than just have one specific TV ad. So I think yes, the way that we approach it should be on a different line item, or at least with an awareness of it's going to do a different thing to what online video should do.
So we have already observed, for sure, like from EMEA and USA, some shift from broadcast, from traditional TV already to CTV, definitely. USA, which is our, of course, biggest market in terms of CTV, some also budget for social that they go to CTV. So, and for people that they've done for a long time digital initiative, they look at CTV actually a lower price than linear TV as well. So if you look at Nielsen report since 2019, the time spent on CTV increased to 81%. So it shows that, of course, now users spend much more time on CTV. This is definitely like the screen that we need to look at. So started first from the shift, and then they're going to allocate like dedicated budget to that format.
From my side, I think there are, it's two angles for it. I think the first one is, do we have the right content on CTV that would be abundant enough to meet the need of a certain demographic? Because if we're talking about, let's say, female between the age of 35 to 50, whatever, so do we have actually here in the MENA region the kind of content that is already streamed on TV and monetized for us to meet this expectation? I think this is what would make the difference, whether it's going to become a standalone sort of a device or maybe a pitch, as we say. And then from another angle is also about the reach opportunity of really, tapping into a new also sort of a target audience that up till now we're not really at the level where it is. And I think also the usability of CTV at the stage right now as a second point, it's still not really super clear. Are we using it, let's say, for big moments, key moments, let's say? Are we using it for some sports events? We need to understand how this usability is, how we can grow this inventory and content further so that we're able more or less to come up with a standalone sort of an approach. Because at the moment right now, and from a Google angle, it's considered to be like a complementary sort of a device. That's definitely growing at exponential rates, but it's not enough for us to meet the demand of everybody. So at the moment, because of the scarcity, the way it's being sold in this region and potentially elsewhere, but it could be because of the highest supply elsewhere in the world, the average CPMs are really like quite crazy. And we're talking here above $40 if we're buying it on a programmatic guaranteed sort of a deal. So we need to be very, very specific and attentive to how we're really looking at this device from now until the next potentially 1 or 2 years until we get the learnings out of it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think one of the difference in the other markets is that there's a company called Roku, which has most penetration in the US, and it's actually 44% of the CTV advertising space in the US, and we don't have it here. But what we do have is big players, like I mentioned how many have ads, but there's a lot more coming. Netflix have tested ads in Q4 last year in the US. They'll be launching ads here as well, but Disney Plus are launching ads. OSN will launch ads. Stars Play. Shahid have actually, they have ads, but they're actually going to be switching much more to an AVOD model. I think 80 or 90% of their inventory from January has been made available on AVODs and advertising video on demand. So there's a lot more coming. As you mentioned, it is the early stage. And to that point, what have we learned in the last 20 years of digital ads, from displays to banners to Google to video? If we're starting from scratch with websites and social networks, which we seem to be a little bit with streaming services, what have we learned? And from a marketing point of view and from your experience and from your company's point of view as well?
Over the past 20 years, like the I guess the ad environments are ever evolving. There will be changes to the different formats and the way that we're able to serve ads. From social environments, that was kind of something that we were talking about maybe 10 years ago as being fairly new. Probably a little bit longer than that, sorry. But like social ad space was something that we had to adapt to over time. CTV is just another evolution of that, and I'm sure it will evolve again in some way, shape or form in terms of the way that people consume their, I guess, their TV consumption, whether it be on a virtual reality device or through gaming environments or whatever it may be. There's going to be an ever-evolving way of thinking when it comes to how are we going to serve ads to the audiences that we're looking to attract for our brands.
Definitely align with you, Dylan, and also on we can feel on a supply on a publisher that they've been to like for so many years and they know like what's happened with the digital, so they are very careful about their content. They want to make sure that they want to keep the control of their data, how they're going to use their metadata, how they're going to monetize their inventory. They want to make sure that they won't disrupt as well the consumer, in terms of like pressure and exposure. So they want to have the control on the ad pod and how many, capping frequency they want to push. So we feel that they are much more conscious. They want to consider the content priceless, to value it much more. So they don't want to take the decision, without making sure that they have the full control on what they're going to expose. So they value the content, which is, I feel.
Yeah, from my side, it's I think we're witnessing like more broadcasters or streaming, let's say, services making their inventory available, through digital pipes. So I think, connected TV is going to start to have an integral role in these media planning activation. And the way we adapted to mobile before, I think this is where we'll have to adapt to CTV as a new device, because I think back in 2021, CTV impressions surpassed mobile impressions, like making it approximately 46% of all the video impression itself. So I think this is a good learning for TV to maybe take advantage of connected TV and to move it from this siloed approach into making it a bit more of a consolidated approach, as we say. But then in this case, it will help maybe TV be able to potentially measure the duplication of reach. It will allow also, on top of what we're doing with TV or linear, is to be able to be more targeted in the way we're doing our media activation. And at the same time, the measurement piece would be super important over here, because at the end of the day, this combination would be able to give us more or less an idea of how connected TV is also impacted ROI in certain, let's say, key elements that we can customize on these TV ads, which we're unable to do on the TV front. And from that angle as well, we know very well that in some markets, we are able to do XMRs, MMMs, to be able to understand more or less what TV is providing versus also the impact of connected TV on the return on ad spend.
Sorry, I shouldn't ask this at industry breakfast. Can you explain those terms? XMR,
it's like XMR, the incrementality of cross reach, and for MMMs is the media marketing mix studies, where ultimately we're measuring in the first one how incrementality of reach is being impacted by the selection of certain devices. And then in the second MMMs is how we're measuring the return on ad spend from the various media activations that we're doing, whether offline or online. So CTV now has been added into these specific, let's say, studies or third-party research studies managed by Kantar or Nielsen, etc. So it would be a validation coming in from an external entity, as we say. So these are two main things that we can bring on the table, just to understand a bit more whether what we're doing with these devices is effectively, impacting the conversion metric or the branding metrics or not.
Perfect. So yeah, I think that does validate that it will be treated as its own category. It's amazing. So yeah, in terms of formats, ad formats, where do you think the responsibility or the innovation will come from? Was intrigued by an industry Ramadan event recently, and they were showing new ad formats that they had for the TV. The innovation was coming from production. They were creating moments as well as the usual ad spots. So where do you see that? Obviously with video, we're used to the terms pre-roll, mid-roll, and post-roll. Is that what we're going to be used to for CTV, and is there room for more innovation as well?
Okay, I'll go first. So I think there's always room for innovation, and I think the change will come from the broadcasters for the most part, in terms of what formats they're allowing, and the inventory partners, what formats they're allowing to be shown on their inventory. I was having an interesting conversation with a filmmaker earlier today in the foyer, and he was saying that the way that they're looking at producing the TV commercials is changing. So that the mindset of going from the whole cinematic approach to making film, the commercials, you now have to think of, okay, is it going to be a vertical environment that the ad is, or the commercial is going to be shown, and how do I shoot it? So I think it's going to come from both the broadcast element and the inventory supply partners, and obviously the way in which people are consuming their TV consumption. So is it going to be on a mobile device or a smart TV device, or any other device that kind of evolves into how people are consuming TV?
So it has started already, the L banners, for example, though we consider it as a new format from the original manufacturer. We are still expecting, due to the growth and acceleration of that format, that we're going to get and be exposed to new format. Again, we have to look at interactivity. So far we only have the QR code, but what's going to be next? So definitely we should see within the, I don't know, like next coming months, but new format to come. And again, back on the ad pod. So based on the position, you know, on the placement of the ad, there is also probably like some expectation that we should wait for.
So one of the best practices that we came up with from the learning of how to really create a creative that is fit for CTV is making it look like as if it's a movie trailer. So ultimately, if you have, let's say, organic content with bloopers, with something that is funny, you mix it all together and you bring it for 30 seconds on the table just to create the excitement. It's as if you're continuing the scene and the mood and the theme of of the movie or the series that you're watching, or let's say the sport event that you're doing. So just adapting to this mood would potentially increase, the attention and drive a bit more the viewability on that approach. So you have to be a bit more particular on how we're doing it. But the way we're seeing it right now, and from the approach from the other advertisers, is that the direction is more on the retail end. It's more on how we can build up this sort of call to action on these videos as well, just to make it a bit more, as we say, measurable. Because if we just want to really showcase a video just to get the viewability of 90%, it's nice, but what actually are we trying to entice people to do, and specifically Generation Z, young audience, to really get the flavor of a bit more, whether they really bought in it or not. So this is why the direction that we're taking right now at that level, it should have this angle. And this has been done, by the way, by a lot of the big FMCG brands, whether Moët Chandon, whether L'Oréal, P&G, etc., by changing this sort of an approach of how to do these sort of execution or production in a way that would be a bit more fast but interactive.
Amazing, yeah, very interesting. So before I open to the floor, I want to talk a little bit about CPMs and benchmarks. We heard that Netflix had entered their test mark with Microsoft for $60 or so CPM. Of course, we all know what CPMs can be on online video, but then comparing that to sort of traditional TV, and we think of how much TV has been bought for, and maybe a Super Bowl ad can go for a 30-second spot for millions and millions of dollars. Are we replacing that? And two parts of the question. What's your view on CPM? And then secondly, is like sometimes when there's limited inventory, is it a chance to go early and get the best out of it? Gary Vaynerchuk always talks about that if you're a brand that leans into TikTok 2 or 3 years ago, you're going to do a lot better. So is that where we are with CTV now? If people embrace the sort of CPMs that are available, how much would they be paying, and would they get a run on their other competitors?
I think it depends. The CPMs will range. If you're looking at a pure YouTube buy, for example, on CTV devices, then obviously your cost is going to be significantly lower than, say, on a broadcaster. So, for example, Shahid, if you want to buy CTV space on Shahid, then obviously that cost is going to go up. In terms of seasonality and when there are big events, I don't think linear TV will be too badly affected. I think there's still a massive amount of attention that's drawn to people watching TV on live events like the big sporting events, the Super Bowls, etc. And there's millions and millions of dollars being spent on the actual adverts themselves, because there is a live audience of millions and millions of people. So they know that there's going to be eyeballs on their ad. With the Shahids, obviously with the Shahids and others, with seasonality, it then starts to become a little bit of a game of inventory and supply. Those costs start to go up because there's only so many eyeballs that they can have on the digital environments, and then it starts to become a game of who got in first and who got the programmatic guaranteed deals in first, who's paying the highest, and that type of thing. So yeah, there's definitely cost challenges and availability challenges when it comes to CTV.
Okay, cool. So, but do you think that there is an opportunity for? Is it cheaper inventory if you went early with it now, or is it that because there isn't everything in place, that mainly experimental budgets might be wasted? What's your view on that?
I think you're probably going to find that it's a little bit more expensive now, quite honestly, because it's still a testing ground. What we'll probably find as people start to adopt the way of watching TV and I know in this region in particular, people are still quite engaged with the linear TV way of watching their shows, whereas in, say, the US, a large part of the way that people consume TV is on a streaming service. So there's very little in terms of the daily TV watching done on a linear TV way of watching. So I think within this region, there's going to be a slower way of adopting streaming services. I mean, with Netflix, I think that will be a game changer when Netflix and say Amazon Prime start to release their TV content that way. But right now, because there is a limited number of supply, you'll find that it's probably more expensive now than what it will be in, say, 2-3 years' time.
I mean, it also depends as well how much of your linear TV spots are being sold or not, because sometimes the connected TV can come at the expense to bridge the gap in terms of whether you've sold most of your inventory or you haven't. So if you have sold the 50%, you would like to maybe compensate on it by selling it through a different, let's say, platform or means. So ultimately, this is probably why CTV can become slightly more expensive if this ratio is ultimately comes at the expense of what is happening on the TV side. And I think this is the case that's happening here in the region, is that potentially it could be, as an assumption, is that maybe most of these TV spots are not being sold at this stage and the inventory is scarce. So we push this cost in a way to make it a bit more, unique and specific to selected, like clients.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's been a few years that we sold CTV definitely in USA for sure, and due to the scarcity that you mentioned, so it's definitely in terms of price we enhance definitely more hyper personalization on the content. So few years ago we were just selling CTV, and then we start to offering bundle on categorization. So either using the metadata or doing the job manually. So, and after all, we had, of course, partner like LiveRamp that we were able to offer on top third-party data. Then it comes with, again, the QR code. And then now we offer the retargeting by collecting, IP, making a pool of IP, and then we retarget cross-device. So we try to make it more personal to definitely guarantee that campaign efficiency is going to be better.
Interesting. Okay, great. Thanks very much, everyone. Just open it up to the floor if anyone has a specific question or would like to share what your view or your company is doing on CTV. Yeah, there's one over there.
Hi.
Introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, my name is Hamid, and I'm in charge of CTV and OTT advertising at OSN. So thank you very much. It's been a great morning. Learned a lot. I have a couple questions, so anyone feel free to cut me off. But I have an answer for you as well, if you actually wanted to know, Richard, regarding the ads that are unseen. So that happens when you are viewing something through a set-top box, which is connected to your TV. And a lot of TVs, obviously, they turn off automatically. But if you're watching a specific app through, let's say, an Apple TV or another set-top box, it'll continue playing. And if ads are being served on that AVOD platform, then obviously it's not seen. So your set-top box serves the ad, but your TV is actually off, and you're not there.
Brilliant, thank you.
Secondly, obviously very interested in the CPM discussion. I find it very interesting, especially Dylan, you just mentioned that you see the CPMs coming down. From a publisher standpoint, over time, as inventory increases. So, like you all said, we have very low inventory here in this region. And we have to build this up. And a lot of us from the publisher side have taken our time to enter into this field because we needed those CPMs to go up for it to be feasible from a business standpoint. And I've been asking the same question, Richard, you mentioned regarding in the news. We were all laughing when it was announced that Netflix was charging $65 CPM. From the other side, I've been having a lot of calls with our partners in the US, Netflix's competitors, who have been doing this for quite a few years. And they're telling me that their CPMs actually go even twice as much as that, especially in open bidding. And I find that very interesting because they have so much inventory. Their sell-through is probably maybe 30, 40% at best. So logically, when you take that into consideration, I would think and hope that our CPMs would actually go up here. So I think that's an interesting thing that just came up recently that I wanted to bring up. And secondly, we're mixing, a lot of people ask this question regarding CTV and OTT, the definitions. So are we going to come to an agreement soon, Richard, with you guys on, what is what? Because we're kind of mixing the both. So from our side, it's, you have OTT. Under OTT, you obviously have mobile and browsers, but you obviously have the CTV apps. And from the other side, you have actual CTV, which is what we also have coming out, which is our addressable linear box. So we need to make sure that we make those definitions and the agencies and the clients understand the differences.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing that about OSN and the ad spend and the CPMs. I think, when we did this, we looked at this at the IAB, and actually Jan Colliter produced a report that's available on the website that has more detail of some of the stats that I said, and it starts off with about 10 slides assessing the last 10 years of OTT apps, and then it talks a little bit about the CTV opportunity. But CTV, the acronym doesn't include the word, doesn't have advertising in it. So, and I think the way that you were talking there in terms of it's an app that's connected to the TV, but an OEM could say my TV is also connected to the internet, so it can be a connected TV. I think anything served over the top, anything served over the top of the internet on another device, I suppose is how we typically think of streaming services like cord cutting. But yeah, it depends. Often depends on where you're approaching it from. If you're approaching it from an advertiser, you might think of it differently. For us, like at Augustus Media, we think of it, okay, with Love in Dubai, we're running shows in the morning, but that's all on social. So how do we look at that? With Smashy TV, we're going, okay, predominantly 50% of our viewers come from smart TV devices. So we're looking at it differently to that. And, so how we're defining it on IAB is connected TV advertising is anything that's incrementally sold over the top. So anything that's above, like we discussed on the YouTube, that's above that video, that's just incremental extra budget and extra revenue. And typically it would usually come, like we discussed, as at the moment as offline TV is bought. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah, linear, yeah. Well, linear is appointment viewing. So linear is 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m. And that can technically be served through streaming. You can have linear streaming. So linear is just, it's different to on demand. Like you can have linear streaming. So, but yeah, there's lots of different acronyms, and it shows where we are in the industry. It shows where we are right now. I think we've just 2 minutes ran over, but if there's any last question, one quick question.
So at this stage right now, no. we're not getting these questions. And not as a comparison, but we're getting it for YouTube in specific. So at the moment, I can't comment at this stage whether we're gonna reach to that level. But even from a global angle, we don't look at it on that point, because for us, they're not totally comparable. We consider YouTube as a TV for those who don't watch TV, so it's a separate entity. And this is why we look at it from that angle as separately, but we can't compare it more or less at this stage. Yeah, we're getting the traffic, of course, but it depends on what you're paying on TV versus YouTube, giving the amount of traffic that you're getting, that you would be able to assess whether you're comparing apple to apple. So at the stage right now, I don't think it's fair for both platforms when we're dealing with this approach.
Okay, great. I think we've run out of time, but thanks everyone. Thanks for the
Thank you.
discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, and the panel, and the previous panel that I was moderating on, and thank you, the audience, for coming today. If I could just quickly ask you before you leave to scan the QR code on the table, and then just give your feedback, which is really useful for us in programming future events and what topics to cover. And thank you to the campaign team who put this event together as well. And we'll see you at the next event, which is in Saudi Arabia at the end of May. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.